"Get out of the display area, sir. That's not a real medal." The guide's voice sliced through the quiet hum of the museum. Her words echoed off the marble floors, sharp enough to turn a few heads. Tourists holding phones and pamphlets glanced over, curiosity flickering like the flash of their camera lenses. In the center of the hall stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply in a navy sweater and worn leather shoes. His skin glowed under the museum lights, dark against the pale stone walls and the polished brass of the exhibits. In his palm, a small medal caught the reflection of the glass displays. Dull around the edges, its ribbon slightly frayed. "It's not a souvenir," the man said quietly. "It's mine." The guide's smile tightened. "Oh, I'm sure it feels like it, but our collection is authentic. That little trinket must have come from a flea market." Her tone drew a few polite laughs from the group. One woman covered her mouth as if to hide her amusement. Another rolled her eyes in sympathy that didn't reach her face. The man didn't flinch. His gaze was steady, his posture respectful. There was no defensiveness in him, only a quiet strength that made the mockery feel smaller somehow. Behind him, the museum's golden letters shimmered across the main display. "Valor and sacrifice, honoring our nation's heroes." Inside the glass, uniforms, badges, and medals gleamed, symbols of courage preserved in perfection. And there, among them hung a familiar crest, the emblem of the 32nd Infantry Division. The Veterans Division, his unit, his brothers. He exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the wall until they landed on a black and white photo. A group of soldiers standing in mud, faces smeared with sweat and ash. Men he knew once by voice, by laughter, by loss. The caption beneath it was missing a line, the corner torn and yellowed, as if time itself had tried to erase a name. A child nearby dropped a brochure, the fluttering sound soft in the silence. The man bent to pick it up, handing it back with a small nod. "Careful, son," he said, his voice gentle. Steady, the same tone one might use on a battlefield when keeping fear at bay. The boy smiled, not fully understanding, and his mother whispered a quick thank you. The guide continued, her voice rising to reclaim the crowd's attention. "Anyway, as I was saying, these medals were awarded to true heroes. Many died in combat, but a few lucky ones made it home with honor intact." Her gaze slid toward the man again, the implication heavy. "Unlike cheap replicas people sometimes claim are real." The veteran looked back at the display. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass, merging with the soldiers in the photograph, his own ghost staring back. His hand brushed the medal's surface once, thumb tracing the worn engraving. "For valor." For a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. The laughter faded. Even the tour group's shuffle grew still. His lips parted, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth, silent and patient, already lived in his eyes, the kind that had seen more than any of them could imagine. The guide cleared her throat, ushering the group forward, pretending not to notice the heaviness she'd left behind. And as the veteran's gaze lingered on the fractured photograph, a quiet thought surfaced, calm, reflective, unshakable. Sometimes, history forgets the very hands that shaped it, until the truth stands right before it. The group moved forward, but the whispers didn't. They lingered, hanging in the air like dust caught in sunlight. The veteran stayed behind, standing before the row of glass cases that told stories he didn't need to read, because he had lived them. His eyes followed the words etched into the plaques, names of operations, places scorched into his memory, faces that would never leave him. He stood there in silence, his reflection merging with the faded photographs of men in uniform. Their youth was frozen behind glass, while his had faded into quiet years and unanswered memories. Behind him, the young intern who'd been tagging along with the tour leaned toward the guide, whispering just loud enough for others to catch. Did he really serve? The guide let out a soft laugh, the kind that hides condescension under politeness. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, lowering her voice, "it's impossible. Someone like him, with that medal?" Her smirk was meant to be subtle, but cruelty rarely hides well. The words rippled through the small crowd. A few people turned, some with disbelief, others with quiet amusement. The veteran didn't react. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and drew out the medal again. The same one she had mocked earlier, The metal was scratched, dulled by time, but it caught the light just enough to show it had once shone proudly. He held it up steady, letting it speak where he wouldn't. "This is mine," he said softly. The guide crossed her arms, the confident authority of her position wrapping around her like armor. "Real metals don't look like that," she said with a laugh that wasn't funny. "Ours are preserved. Authentic, you can see the difference." She gestured toward the pristine replica encased behind the glass. "Go on," she added, turning to the group. "Compare it yourselves." A few leaned closer, curious now. The murmurs grew. People debating quietly, some defending the man, others doubting. At the edge of the gathering, a security guard began to move closer, his expression cautious but unreadable. He wasn't sure if he was there to protect the museum or to remove the man who made others uncomfortable. His hand rested near his radio, ready for either choice. The veteran didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't defend himself with pride or anger. He simply looked at the metal, then at the wall behind the glass. "That one," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the murmurs, "is incomplete." The crowd fell silent. He pointed to the display, to the metal mounted in the center of the case, perfect and gleaming, except for a gap at its edge, a missing clasp that had once held a ribbon in place. His gaze was calm, certain. "They're the same kind," he said. "Same division. Same inscription." The guide frowned, the first hint of doubt flickering across her face. "That's not possible," she muttered. "This piece was cataloged years ago." "Then call your curator," the veteran replied, still steady. "Maybe he can tell you how history lost its way." The guard hesitated, looking between them before quietly radioing for assistance. The group's attention locked on the scene. The whispers gone now, replaced by a hum of tension. Moments later, the curator appeared, a man in a tailored suit, irritation already written across his face. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. The guide gestured quickly. "This man claims to own one of our medals." The curator raised a hand. "Enough," he turned to the veteran. "Sir, may I see it?" Without hesitation, the veteran handed it over. The curator took it, inspecting it briskly at first, but then his movements slowed. He turned it in his hand, brow furrowing. He looked up, then back down, his fingers brushing the edge of the metal where a small notch glinted under the light. He stepped closer to the display, eyes narrowing. Slowly, carefully, he raised the veteran's medal toward the one inside the case. The crowd leaned in. Breath caught. The two pieces met and clicked perfectly. The sound was quiet, almost imperceptible. But in that silence, it was deafening. The curator froze, eyes widening as he realized what everyone else now saw, the missing edge. The matching number engraved along the curve. The truth that needed no words. And in that suspended moment, with the crowd staring and the guide's face draining of color, the air felt heavier, as if time itself had stopped to correct a lie. Then just as the realization began to sink in, the curator drew a sharp breath and whispered, barely audible, This can't be. The section ends here, suspended between disbelief and revelation, as the next act waits for truth to take its full shape." A heavy silence filled the hall. Thick, unmoving, absolute. Every whisper that had floated moments ago vanished, replaced by the faint hum of the museum lights above. All eyes were fixed on the display case. The curator stood frozen, one hand trembling slightly as he held the veteran's medal against the glass. The jagged edge of the missing clasp fit perfectly into the fracture of the museum's piece. Together they formed one whole, seamless, complete, undeniable. The engraved number along the rim glimmered faintly, a string of digits etched decades ago by hands that had once trembled for an entirely different reason. Not awe, but survival. The curator's brow furrowed, his irritation melting into confusion, then disbelief. He leaned closer, eyes darting between the engraved code and the old archive tag beneath the display. "It was identical. This," he whispered, voice barely audible. "This medal is the original." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The guide's hand fell from her clipboard. Her confident smirk evaporated, leaving her face pale and hollow. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Only the faint sound of her own uneven breath. The veteran stood still, shoulders drawn back, gaze steady. His expression didn't gloat, didn't accuse. It simply carried the weight of truth that had waited too long to be seen. The curator finally turned toward him. Where did... The veteran's voice, when it came, was quiet but sure. I was there, he said. In '69. That medal was pinned on me by my commander the morning after the river assault. We were barely standing. The air was thick with smoke and fear. I remember it because I didn't think I'd live long enough to keep it. He glanced at the medal again, eyes softening. I lost it when we pulled out. My gear was left behind. But another man, a young corporal, picked it up, thinking it might help his family remember what we fought for. He wrote me once after the war saying he'd keep it safe. I never asked for it back. I thought it was gone. The words sank into the space like a slow tide. The crowd listened, their earlier skepticism dissolving into quiet respect. Even the security guard, who'd stood ready to intervene, looked away now, his posture easing. The guide's throat tightened. I didn't know, she managed, voice barely a whisper. I thought that it couldn't be mine. The veteran's eyes met hers, not sharp, but steady. I know. For a moment, she couldn't look at him. Her face burned with the realization of what she'd said, what she'd implied. But when she finally glanced up again, she found no anger in his expression, only forgiveness that stung more deeply than any accusation ever could. He simply nodded once. The gesture small but profound. The curator straightened, clearing his throat. His tone had changed completely. Reverent now, almost trembling. This medal, he said, turning to the staff, will go back where it belongs, with his name and his story, displayed for everyone to see. The guide's eyes flicked toward the veteran's name as he carefully wrote it down. Sergeant Desmond Cole. The letters looked sharp against the white of the label, every stroke rewriting the narrative she had mocked only moments ago. As the curator placed the reunited medal into the display case, the lights above seemed to glow warmer. The glass reflected the veteran's face, not as an outsider now, but as part of history itself. The crowd remained hushed, caught between awe and shame, watching the scene unfold like a truth long overdue. The guide stood a few steps back, hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper as she looked at the man she had belittled. I'm so sorry. Desmond gave a faint, weary smile. History has a way of forgiving, he said quietly. We just have to stop forgetting. And as the curator sealed the display, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoed like a full stop at the end of a long, unjust sentence. A moment of stillness that promised the story wasn't over yet, only finally told. A week later, the exhibit looked different. The harsh lights that once cast cold reflections now glowed softer, warmer, almost reverent. Beneath the same glass case where silence once stung, a new plaque gleamed in gold lettering. Sergeant Desmond Cole, honored for valor and integrity. Visitors drifted through the hall, their voices hushed as they read the words aloud. Some recognized the name, whispering to one another about the man who had once stood right there. Quiet, calm, humiliated, before truth turned the room on its head. Others lingered longer, their eyes moving between the medal and the photo beside it. A younger Desmond, standing shoulder to shoulder with his battalion, the same unshakable dignity etched into his expression. The guide stood near the display, gloves on, adjusting the final placement of the medal. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered it onto its velvet mount. The sound of the glass case closing echoed faintly, a soft click that carried both closure and regret. For a moment, she didn't move. Her reflection wavered against the glass, layered perfectly over the engraved name beneath, her face over his story. It was an image she wouldn't forget, a reminder of how easily pride can blur truth, and how humbling it feels when the truth stares back. A quiet voice broke the moment. You got it straight this time, she turned. Desmond stood a few steps away, dressed in the same neat sweater and worn shoes. No medals on his chest, no spotlight following him. Just the same quiet strength that had filled the hall that day. I wanted to make sure it was right, she said softly. It is, he replied, nodding once. His tone held no bitterness, only grace. I didn't come to be honored, just to make sure the stories told true. The curator joined them, offering a handshake. You did more than that, Sergeant. You reminded us why these walls exist, Desmond smiled faintly. Then that's enough for me. He turned toward the exit, walking slowly down the marble corridor. The crowd parted instinctively, watching him go. Near the entrance, a group of school children stood gathered around the new display, their voices bright with curiosity. "Who's Sergeant Desmond Cole?" one asked. Another read from the plaque aloud, proud and clear. "A soldier who showed bravery and honor, even when no one believed him." The teacher nodded. "Remember that. Sometimes heroes don't wear medals. Sometimes they are the missing piece." As Desmond passed them, he paused just long enough to listen. The sound of those young voices carried after him. Soft, innocent, full of promise. He smiled. Then, without looking back, he stepped into the sunlight, his shadow stretching long behind him, no longer burdened, but honored by the truth that had finally found its place. Respect isn't given by title or uniform. The narrator's voice lingers, calm and reflective. It's earned by truth, and remembered by those who finally choose to see. Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments.